Hello and welcome to Maths with Jacob. This lesson will focus on angles. When two lines meet at a point, an angle is formed at that point. Describing angles. In Grade 2 or Year 2, angles are described according to their shape as follows. So let's see. We have one line here. We have one line here. They meet at this point, there, and that is the angle here. Let's look at this one. We have a line there and a line here. They meet at that point there, so there is the angle. It is called a sharp angle because of this sharp point here that's made by the two lines. Just pretend that's the end of a spear, for example. It's very, very sharp, and that's why they're called sharp angles. On the other hand, blunt angles, if you look at the outside here, they're a little bit flat, aren't they? They are not as sharp. So that's why they're called blunt angles. And the angles, when it's a blunt angles, are a lot larger. See that angle there? It's quite large. And this one here is very, very large. So for very large angles like this one, they're called blunt angles because the outside is not sharp. Importance of lines and angles. Lines and angles are very important because many 2D shapes and 3D objects are constructed using them. So if we look at the very popular square, we have 4 lines and 4 angles inside. The rectangle, exactly the same thing. It's a different shape, but it still has 4 lines and 4 angles inside. Triangles. So here are 2 triangles. Each of them have 3 sides. And basically here we have 3 sharp angles. Here we have 2 sharp angles and a blunt angle. Now lines and angles also form 3D objects. This is a cube. You can see all the lines and the angles. And the cube is so called, it's called a cube because it's a box with square sides. Because all the sides are in the shape of a square, that's why it's called a cube. Here we also have a 3D object. It's called a rectangular prism, and it's a box with rectangular sides. So all the sides, the 6 sides, that's the top, the bottom, and all the ones on the side, they're rectangles, and that's why it's called a rectangular prism. And that's formed, when that's formed, you have lines and you've got angles. So lines and angles in the real world. So we need lines and angles. They're very important in the real world, and here are some examples. If you look at this pair of scissors, just pretend that's a line there, and that's a line there, and then you've got some angles here and here. So that's a pretty good example of how we can use lines and angles in the real world. Many flags are made up of lines and angles, and here's a perfect example. The hands of a clock, if you look at the minute hand, the hour hand, and the second hand, they perform very, very important roles. And as they're going around, you can see how the angles are formed. So that's a perfect example of lines and angles in real life. Many tables are constructed, and straight lines come into play, as you can see, and we also have angles. And the famous Rubik's Cube. That is also constructed, and there are many, many lines here, and you can see many, many angles too. So this video has introduced us to the concept of angles, and we've seen how we need lines to make angles, and we've seen some examples of shapes in real life that are formed by using lines and angles.